Ladies and gentlemen, we told you so. The EFF is a party in decline. But before we get on to the main news story, can I please once again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support the work I do, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. You know the drill, link is in the description box below. But before we get on to the main news story, let's have some fun with some of the other news. The first is that Black First Land First is having a high tea party with the MK party. Now I must admit, when I first saw this, I laughed my head off silly. Because you see, Black First Land First doesn't like the imperialists. But they don't seem to understand where the high tea party came from. It was Queen Victoria. So we can lobby to have her statue removed from places like, Parliament Square in Port Elizabeth. But we can have her high tea. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. You know what else doesn't make sense? Herman Mashaba. So apparently Herman Mashaba says that he is now negotiating with the ANC. Because he respects the ANC? I mean, I did interviews with him prior to the elections, and he did not respect the ANC. But now he does, because, he's hoping they'll give him mayorship. Apparently, they now have some mutual respect, because, DA is toxic and racist. Yeah, I heard all that before. But, this is my problem with him, Mashaba. Like, no political consistency. It's all we ask for. Political consistency. You said you hate the ANC. Now you don't. That's not consistent. That's an issue. And you know what else is an issue? The EFF's Dali Mpofu. How he constantly seems to keep getting work, I will never know. The guy gets paid millions of rands to run certain cases around the country for key politicians and loses every single one of them. His success rate must be like 0%. The problem is he recently did an appeal for the former public prosecutor, now EFF minister, and this was basically against their impeachment. But you see, the appeal judgment has now come out and basically had the following to say. The first is they said that Dali Mpofu suffers from what I would actually say many politicians in South Africa suffer from. And that is, he tends to work with the same people over and over again, which means that he hears their arguments over and over again. Much like we hear from the politicians, right? They only ever work with the same people, have the same ideas to them, so they sit in what this judgment described as a tunnel, or what we might describe in philosophy as an echo chamber. According to this judge, what that means is they all convince themselves of the merits of the case and then assumes that everybody else just accepts the merits of the case. Like, yeah, that must be the case because we all believe it. The problem is that in this specific appeal, the judge said that there were no reasonable prospects that any reasonable lawyer would have determined that there was an objective way that an appeal could be conducted. But you see, the only reason that they assumed that appeal could be conducted is because, well, they just believed that to be the case. No actual reasons. And you see, that in itself was the issue raised. The judge said that no prep had been done on the case. They just assumed they'd win by just, pitching up and using the normal hyperbole that they do. Now, let us not forget that Dali Mpofu didn't really do any real prep, according to this judge. He just rocked up, said the same old stuff he'd always just say, and then got paid millions, which he described as peanuts. Must be nice to work for them peanuts. But you see, the judge actually went a bit further. He says Dali Mpofu actually has a massive problem. And again, it's a problem that we see in many spheres of government. He said that when Dali Mpofu gives his arguments, he often exceeds his time. He said that his arguments are protracted and often aggressive, with frequent sighs. He uses a lot of rhetoric, political posturing, theatrical gestures, and long-winded dismissals, during which he just calls everybody like stupid because they don't understand his ways, because they're not African, and some of them are like white supremacists, even when they aren't white, even when they're like someone else, but they still have white tendencies, because why don't you believe him? Trust me, bro. And you see, just like clockwork, the public prosecutor actually responded to the dismissal of her appeal by calling the judge a racist, because he was an Indian. Kind of proves the judge's point. All this is political posturing. It's actually pretty bad. And yet again, I must ask the question, how the hell does Dali Mpofu keep getting work? So on then to the main news story, because we've already covered Dali Mpofu, and somebody else that uses political rhetoric and big theatrics is the EFF. And interestingly enough, the EFF had a comment on John Steenhuisen's first 100 days in office. Why John? Well, I don't know, your guess is as good as mine. Probably because, he's the leader of the DA, and he's white. That makes him racist. Anyway, the EFF described his first 100 days in office as being incompetent and corrupt. And when asked why it was incompetent and corrupt, they said, well, John employed, like Ramon Kamanak, and he's a white supremacist. And that deployment was just cater deployment, even though Ramon's not a member of a political party and therefore can't be deployed by the political party. Apparently, John also nominated some other individuals who only had matric. Because you see, all of the EFFs say they have like degrees and stuff that they got, bought from certain universities. And that makes them all really smart. As Elon Musk once said, you can have a degree and still be stupid, and the EFF is proof of that. So how do I know that that's proof of that the EFF are dumb? Well, here's another example where the EFF says Iran has the right to defend itself. For those of you who have been living under a rock, Iran is currently firing missiles at Israel. Now, for those of you who also don't know, this was in response to bombing Hezbollah in Lebanon, which isn't in Iran. Yes, Hezbollah is a terrorist group, but apparently they're funded or they're supported by the Iranian government. So possibly it's a proxy of Iran. So basically Iran is firing missiles at Israel because Israel clubbed one of their proxies who aren't their proxies, and that's self-defense, even though it isn't to anybody. Yeah, you can make the logic work yourself. You can let me know in the comment section below. But you see, it's for all these reasons that the Social Research Foundation has now done a poll since the GNU started and found that the ANC and the DA are both showing massive support and growth in that support. Apparently 60% of the individuals surveyed determined that the GNU was actually working, that they actually had some hope for once in the country. MK's support held steady at 12%, but EFF support declined to 6%. Basically, no one likes the EFF anymore, because they're dumb. So how do we know that the Social Research Foundation actually got their research correct? Well, in the first instance, apparently, the chairperson of Limpopo has left the party for MK. And in Nelson Mandela Bay, the student union of the EFF, the student union's student council, lost all of the campuses. They are no longer in any of the campuses. The ANC and the DA's student councils both won some positions, which shows you nobody's giving the EFF a second thought. Now, you may look at the student unions and say, well, that's not really that an important story, except it is, because if you understand the way the EFF set themselves up, it's like they first went off to the universities. They wanted to get the, young students, brainwash them, and then hopefully they'd eventually become leaders. But now they're getting voted out of the universities because no one actually sees a future with their type of rhetoric. This isn't good news for the EFF. In fact, it actually spells the decline of the EFF. And the EFF's decline has been going on for some time, but it does seem like it might be getting to a crescendo. But you can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Maybe I've misunderstood the entire thing. You're more than welcome to tell me. Anyway, until next time, bye.
This destroyer of peace today is the cry of the innocent, unborn child. If a mother can murder her own child in her own womb, what is left for you and for me to kill each other? Even in the scripture, it is written, even if mother could forget her child, I will not forget you. I have curved you in the palm of my hand. But today, millions of unborn children are being killed. But nobody speaks of the millions of little ones are being conceived with the same life as you and I, with the life of God.